On the witness stand, Stormy Daniels detailed her alleged sexual encounters with former U.S. President Donald Trump. For hours, the 45-year-old adult film star offered some pretty visceral moments before they had sex in 2006, including that Trump told her that she reminded him of his daughter, Ivanka. On the stand, Stormy Daniels, the former adult film star and director at the center of the first criminal trial of Donald J. Trump. The $130,000 deal in exchange for her silence is at the heart of the prosecution's case.
Is this true?
Can you sleep with Stormy?
On Tuesday, prosecutors tried to paint Daniels as a credible witness, having her reveal specific details of her alleged sexual encounter with Trump and the events surrounding it.
Stormy represented herself incredibly well, that she stood by her truth.
Trump denies the affair. During cross-examination, the former president's attorney tried to undercut Daniels' testimony by attacking her motivations, credibility, and demonstrating how much she hates Trump. Daniels testified she met the former president while working at a celebrity golf tournament in 2006. That's when Trump invited her to dinner. Later, in his penthouse suite, she said they talked for 2 hours and Trump asked thoughtful business questions. She explained she went to the bathroom, and when I exited, he was just up on the bed like this, in boxers and a t-shirt, she said, while demonstrating his pose for the jury. She noted it was not in a threatening manner. Daniels said, "The next thing I know, I was on the bed." She described their relationship in a 2018 interview to Anderson Cooper for 60 Minutes.
So he definitely wanted to continue to see you?
Oh, for sure. Yes. And this was not a secret. He never asked me not to tell anyone. He called several times when I was in front of many people, and I'd be like, oh my God, he's calling. And people like, shut up, the Donald?
This was the story that Donald Trump did not want America to hear. This is why he was willing to pay the money to her. There was a woman he wanted to sleep with who he was saying reminded him of his daughter. If that had gotten out, it would have been make America gag again.
During Daniels' testimony, Trump nudged his attorney repeatedly, who objected to questions and answers when Daniels suggested she didn't want to be alone with Trump again. The judge agreed and struck several of her answers from the record. When the Access Hollywood tape came out before the 2016 election, Daniels said she spoke with her publicist about selling her story.
Suddenly people are reaching out to me again, offering me money. Large amounts of money.
She soon learned Trump and his ex-attorney Michael Cohen were interested in paying for her story in a $130,000 deal that came with a non-disclosure agreement. Daniels testified how she wanted the deal done before the election because she was worried, quote, "I wouldn't be safe," or that he wouldn't pay and there would be a trail to keep me safe. Trump was clearly not happy and claimed the testimony was, in nicer terms than used, BS.
The judge even talking to his attorneys saying, like, look, I can hear that he was cursing audibly and shaking his head in the court, which could be intimidating to a witness.
After a court break, Trump's team moved for a mistrial, pointing to aspects of Daniels' testimony like the fact that Stormy said Trump did not wear a condom. Trump's lawyers saying the comments inflamed the jury and were irrelevant to the case.
It's hard to unring the bell or the genie's out of the bottle. The jury heard it all, and I'm sure it affects them.
Trump attorney Todd Blanche argued this is the kind of testimony that makes it impossible to come back from.
It was extraneous. It shouldn't have been said. The witness went off on her own, and I'm sure that was more than the prosecution had expected her to say, but there it is. It's on the record.
But Judge Juan Merchan ruled against the call for a mistrial. So with that decision, Trump's team took their turn to question Daniels. One of Trump's attorneys asked Daniels, quote, "Am I correct that you hate President Trump?" "Yes," Daniels responded. That's where things left off Tuesday. The proceedings took a planned break today, but tomorrow the defense will continue its cross-examination. So how damning has the evidence been so far? Here's an analysis by former New York federal prosecutor Jessica Roth.
The evidence thus far establishes quite clearly that there was a scheme to falsify records at the Trump Organization and to conceal payments to Michael Cohen that were reimbursing him for payments he in turn made to Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet about her alleged affair with the former president right before the presidential election. So I think that much has been pretty clearly established. What is less clear at this point is whether or not Trump himself was personally involved in the falsification scheme, and that's critical for establishing the charges in this indictment. Michael Cohen's testimony will be critical in this regard, and the jury has heard evidence from other witnesses that in a sense circumstantially supports what I anticipate Michael Cohen will say about Trump being involved, because those other witnesses from the Trump Organization have talked about how personally involved Donald Trump was in all the financial affairs, including the signing of checks and approving invoices at the Trump Organization.
When Roth sat down for an interview with Reuters, she went through the testimony of Stormy Daniels and what led the defense to request a mistrial. Did the evidence Stormy presented on the stand go too far?
The judge clearly was concerned about the extent of detail in her direct examination. For example, she mentioned that the former president didn't use a condom when they had intercourse. She talked about the encounter in ways that did not allege that it was a sexual assault, but came very close to describing it in those terms. Things that, again, were not necessary for the story in terms of the allegations and the charges in this case. That said, there is an argument that some of the detail was necessary for the jury to evaluate why Trump would have been so concerned about the story coming out when it did. Because if she told the story with that level of detail, had she gone public, it would have been more damaging than if it were essentially just a bare bones allegation that there had been a sexual encounter of some kind.
According to Roth, particularly damaging to Trump thus far has been the testimony of close confidants David Pecker of the National Enquirer and former aide Hope Hicks.
So I thought David Pecker was an excellent choice of a first witness for the prosecution because he laid the framework for the catch and kill scheme and talked about Trump's involvement in it and how it was tied to the presidential election and how Trump cared very much about making sure that the stories, for example, of Karen McDougal and the doorman who had come forward saying that he knew about a so-called love child with the former president, which was not believed, but nevertheless could have been damaging, that Trump was concerned about the impact on the election. Similarly, Hope Hicks, who was working on the campaign staff, talked about Trump's concern about the impact on the election if these stories had been made public. I thought it was also important that those two witnesses clearly had no axe to grind with Trump, and this is what sets them apart from Stormy Daniels and I expect Michael Cohen when he testifies, both of whom have considerable bias, I think we would say, against the former president. The district attorney's office said yesterday that they believe they have 2 weeks left in their presentation of evidence. So that would take us to some point toward the end of May. And then the question is whether Mr. Trump's team will put on a defense, including whether Trump himself will testify.